At my birthday, my nephew kicked the cake and shouted, "Dad says you're worthless." My mom said, "Ignore him, he's just honest." I smiled and left. Hours later, Dad texted, "We're done with you." My sister liked it. I replied, "Perfect timing, I just froze your accounts." By midnight, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I never thought my 32nd birthday would end with my entire family turning against me. It started like any other forced gathering. My mother insisted we celebrate as a family, even though the word family had started to sound like a joke to me. I had tried to avoid it, told them I wanted something quiet this year, but she guilted me into hosting it. According to her, refusing would make me look ungrateful after everything they've done for me. The irony still makes me laugh. The house smelled of vanilla frosting and expensive candles I had lit to make things seem perfect. My mother liked to say appearances mattered. My father sat in the corner, scrolling through his phone, pretending to be bored. My sister Dory came with her husband Mark, the self-proclaimed businessman, whose last 3 ventures were funded by me, and their son Jeremy, the family's little angel who could do no wrong. For a while I played along. I smiled, I listened, I let them talk about their achievements, that were all built from my money. Every conversation somehow circled back to what I could do for them. When I brought out the cake, I felt a strange heaviness in my chest, like I already knew something was about to happen. Jeremy ran up to the table before anyone could light the candles. He looked at me, grinning in that smug way kids do when they've been taught to disrespect someone. Then without hesitation he kicked the cake straight off the table. It smashed against the floor, frosting everywhere. Everyone gasped, but not for long. Jeremy said almost proudly, "Dad says you're worthless." For a moment the room went dead silent. My eyes moved from him to Dory, who just shrugged, pretending not to hear. My mother, of course, took control of the situation in her usual way, by making it worse. She said, "Ignore him, Emma, he's just being honest." It was like she'd been waiting her whole life to say that out loud. Something inside me snapped, but not in the way people expect. I didn't yell or cry or throw them out. I just stood there, nodded once, and walked out of my own house while they were still talking behind me. No one followed. No one even texted. Hours later, I sat on the couch, staring at the dark window, wondering if I should feel sad or relieved. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a message in the family group chat from my dad. "We're done with you." Dory liked it instantly. That tiny heart reaction felt like a knife. I stared at the screen for a long minute before typing back, "Perfect timing, I just froze your accounts." At first they all reacted with laughing emojis. My mother wrote, "You won't do it." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Every account, every joint card, every loan with my name on it, I shut it all down. Years of them using my credit, my money, my patience. It ended with a few clicks. By midnight my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls, messages, missed calls again. They must have realized it wasn't a bluff. I sat there in the dark, listening to the constant vibration, and for the first time in my life I felt something close to peace. I didn't sleep that night. My phone buzzed until the battery finally gave up. When it died, the house went completely silent. For the first time in years, no one could reach me, no one could ask for just a little help, and no one could pretend to care. I thought I'd feel lonely, but I didn't. I felt empty in a calm way, like I'd finally cleared a room that had been filled with noise for too long. By morning, I charged my phone and scrolled through the messages. Dozens of missed calls. My mother had sent paragraphs about how I'd embarrassed the family. My father demanded to know what gave me the right to touch their money, and Dory just kept sending question marks. Then there was one voice message from Mark that said, "You better fix this before I take legal action." That one actually made me laugh out loud. What none of them seemed to understand was that everything they owned under my name was legally mine. The house they lived in. I had bought it. The car my father drove. Registered to me. Even Dory's business account had my tax ID linked. They thought I wouldn't have the courage to pull the plug, but that night I did. Around noon someone knocked on my door. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was one of them, but when I looked through the peephole I saw Uncle Peter. He was the only one who'd ever treated me like a person, not a bank. I opened the door and he just said, "I heard something happened." I invited him in, made coffee, and told him everything. The party, Jeremy, the message, the accounts. Every detail. He listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging. When I finished, he nodded and said, "You did what they forced you to do. They've used you for too long and now they're angry the machine stopped working." It felt strange hearing it out loud, like someone finally saw the truth. He stayed for a while, helped me block their numbers, and told me to expect them to try another angle soon. Guilt. He said they'd play the victim, call relatives, twist the story, maybe even claim I stole from them. He was right. By evening, my cousin Mia texted me, asking if it was true that I'd frozen my parents' retirement funds. My mother had already started her campaign. I didn't respond. I just muted the chat. That night, I scrolled through old photos, birthdays, family dinners, vacations I'd paid for, and realized I couldn't find a single picture where I actually looked happy. I'd spent my entire adult life trying to buy love that was never for sale. Then a message popped up from an unknown number. It was short, "You'll regret this." No name, but I knew who it was. And I knew that this wasn't over yet. 2 days passed before anyone had the nerve to show up in person. I thought maybe the silence meant they were figuring things out on their own, maybe even feeling some kind of regret, but no, they were planning. It was early afternoon when someone buzzed my office downstairs. I checked the intercom monitor and there she was, Dory, standing there in one of those neutral-colored trench coats she wore when she was pretending to be put together. I didn't buzz her in, but she waited. 5 minutes later, I heard her coming up the back staircase. She knew the building well enough. She knocked, then opened the door without waiting for permission. Walked in like she owned the place. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't sat there at my birthday party and let her son call me worthless. Like she hadn't hearted that message in the family group chat. She didn't even say hello. Just sat across from me, crossed her legs, and asked how long I planned to keep this going. I didn't answer. She started going on about how everything had gotten blown out of proportion, and that emotions were high. She said she understood that I'd felt attacked, but freezing the accounts was, in her words, dramatic. Then she smiled like this was just another one of our little sibling squabbles from childhood. She said, "Look, we've been talking and we think there's a fair way to move forward. Everyone's willing to forgive you for the overreaction. Forgive me." Then came the real reason she was there. She told me they talked it over and were willing to let me have a percentage of the rental income from the house my money had bought, if I just unfroze the accounts and stopped acting like a dictator. They wanted me to hand it all back, and in return they'd give me a cut of my own money. I looked at her, didn't say anything, just waited for her to hear herself. But she didn't flinch. She stood up and said, "Honestly, we just want to get back to normal. It's not healthy to hold a grudge. I'm doing this for your sake too." Then she left. Didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't apologize. Didn't even say goodbye. Just turned and walked out the same way she came. An hour later my phone rang. My mother. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I sat and stared at the screen for a few minutes before listening to it. Her voice was calm, too calm. She said my father hadn't been feeling well. That his blood pressure had skyrocketed after the account fiasco. That he'd been seeing red, that they were worried something could happen to him. And if it did, she said, "I hope you can live with that." There was, right on cue, the guilt. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I felt bad, but because I couldn't believe how predictable they all were. It was like watching a badly written play you'd already seen 10 times. I went through old messages, text threads asking for a small loan to cover rent, a few thousand to invest in a great opportunity, just a little help with Jeremy's private school tuition, and every single time I'd said yes. No questions. No hesitation. They had bled me dry emotionally for years. And now that the money was gone, they suddenly wanted to talk about forgiveness. Around midnight I got a message from Mark. Just one sentence. "We're meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. Just so you know." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into every bank and financial account tied to the family's assets, and moved everything that had my name on it into a protected trust. Changed all passwords. Enabled two-factor authentication. Then I called my attorney and had him draft a cease and desist letter to each of them, stating in clear legal terms that if they attempted to claim any funds or property, I'd pursue charges. I sent the letters the next morning. Not to scare them, just to make it official. By noon my phone rang again. Uncle Peter. The only person in my life who never asked for anything. I answered. He said he'd heard what happened and he wasn't surprised. He told me I did what they'd never thought I had the guts to do. Then he said something that stuck with me. "They raised you to serve them. The moment you stopped, they called you cruel." Then he invited me to his birthday dinner the following week. Said he was inviting everyone, Me, my parents, Dory, even Mark. He wanted it all out in the open. I said yes. Not because I wanted a scene, but because I wanted to see what they'd do when they realized their last bargaining chip, me, was gone. And I wanted them to say everything to my face. One last time. Peter's birthday landed on a Thursday. He kept it small, just family and a few old friends. It was at his house, the same one we used to visit when I was a kid. Back then, I remember thinking his home felt different. Plumber. He wasn't like the rest of them. He never raised his voice. Never played games. When I arrived, Peter met me at the door himself. He gave me a real hug, not one of those stiff, cold family greetings I was used to. Then he told me everyone else was already there. I could hear them from the hall. My mother laughing, Dory talking loudly, Mark trying to impress someone with a story that didn't sound true. The moment I walked in, everything went quiet. My mother barely looked at me. My father didn't even bother pretending to smile. Dory raised her eyebrows like she was surprised I had the nerve to show up. Mark gave me the same fake smirk he always did. Jeremy wasn't there, thankfully. Dinner started quietly. Peter sat at the head of the table trying to keep things light. It worked for about 10 minutes. Then my mother leaned over and asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Are you done with your tantrum yet?" I didn't answer. I kept eating. Then my father spoke up. "You humiliated us. You froze everything like we're criminals." Dory cut in. "You act like you're the victim, but none of this would have happened if you weren't so obsessed with control." Mark leaned forward. "We had plans tied up in those accounts. Real plans. You've put us months behind." It all unraveled fast. They weren't angry I left the party. They weren't even angry about the cake. They were furious because I'd finally taken the power away. My mother raised her voice. "We raised you better than this. You were nothing before we gave you that education. That job. That life." Actually laughed. Out loud. "Because I paid for that education. I got that job without their help. I built this life." Peter stood up, but no one noticed. They were all still attacking me, shouting over each other. "You're a selfish, arrogant, ungrateful." Peter slammed his glass down. The table went silent. He looked around at all of them and said, "Get out." My mother blinked. "What? This is my house. My birthday. And you've all made it about yourselves. You couldn't go one night without turning it into a circus. You didn't even wish me happy birthday." No one spoke. He pointed at the door. "Leave." They hesitated, waiting for someone else to object. No one did. So one by one they stood up. My father walked out first, fuming. Dory and Mark followed, muttering under their breath. My mother paused, looked at me like she wanted to say something cruel, then just walked out. Peter sat back down, rubbed his forehead and said, "Well, that was overdue." I didn't know what to say. He leaned back and looked at me. "You didn't break the family, Emma. You finally exposed it." That night, for the first time in my adult life, I slept without checking my phone. No calls. No threats. No guilt. Just silence. But the fallout wasn't over. Not even close. The silence didn't last. By the next morning, the story had already spread. Not the real one, of course. Their version. I woke up to texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, asking if it was true I'd kicked my family out of Peter's house. One message even said, "Your poor mom was crying all night." Another said I should be ashamed. That I'd publicly humiliated my own father on his brother's birthday. They'd flipped the narrative fast. Made it sound like I was some entitled brat who threw a fit and ruined everything. I didn't respond. Not to any of them. But I did call Peter. He just laughed when I told him what was going around. Said, "Let them talk. The people who matter already know the truth." Then he told me something else. Apparently, my father called him after they left and demanded an apology. Said I never should have been invited in the first place. That Peter had enabled me. Peter told him to lose his number. By Sunday it got worse. I found out my parents had told the rest of the extended family that I'd stolen their retirement funds. Claimed I'd locked them out of their own accounts and used the money for personal luxuries. They even sent around a screenshot, cropped, of one of my bank transfers. Left out the fact that the money had been mine to begin with. It was deliberate. They were trying to ruin me in every direction they could. Then came the guilt phase again. Dory emailed me a heartfelt letter, talking about childhood memories, how we used to play in the backyard, how things had gone so wrong. She said Jeremy missed me. She said our parents were suffering. Then she added at the end, "You can still fix this before it's too late." Made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because they still didn't get it. They thought this was a negotiation, a Cold War, a standoff. But I wasn't trying to win. I'd already walked away. Later that week, Mark tried to contact one of my clients. I found out through an email forwarded to me. He tried to suggest I wasn't trustworthy with finances, that they should look deeper into my background. That's when I stopped playing nice. I met with my attorney again. We drafted a formal cease and desist, sent it to every single family member involved. Then I made something clear. If they contacted any of my clients again or made another defamatory claim, we'd go to court. Peter called me the next morning and said my father was livid. Said he called the letter a betrayal. Said I was threatening my own blood. I didn't care anymore. They wanted war. So I gave them the paperwork. By the end of the week, I shut down all shared assets. Sold the rental property. Cut off every card they were still using. Pulled out of the joint investment Dory had begged me to fund last year. And when it was done, I transferred everything into an account under a new LLC with no family ties. Just me. The final blow came quietly. Mark's business tanked without the funding. Dory's account bounced twice and her landlord started eviction proceedings. My father lost his car when the lease, under my name, expired. And my mother? She tried to open a new credit line. Denied. Her score had been built on mine. They didn't just lose money. They lost access. They lost power. But still I knew something else was coming. Something bigger. And it arrived in the form of an envelope. From their lawyer. They were suing me. The envelope came in a plain Manila folder with no return address. Just my name and home address typed neatly on a sticker. I knew what it was the second I saw it. Inside was a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. 4 pages of carefully worded nonsense, accusing me of unlawful seizure of shared assets, emotional damages, and financial abuse of vulnerable family members. They even listed specific items they were claiming. The house, the accounts, the investments, everything I had already legally protected. At the bottom of the letter, 3 names were printed. My mother, my father, and Dory. Not Mark. Not Jeremy. Just the 3 people who'd spent the most years shaping me into someone they could take from. I read it twice. Not because I didn't understand it the first time, but because I needed to see how far they were willing to go. They were suing me for the life they thought they were owed. I called my attorney and forwarded the letter. He wasn't surprised. In fact, he told me this kind of thing happens more than people think. Families suing the one relative who finally says no. He went over the paperwork I'd signed months ago, the transfers, the documentation, the agreements. He told me I was solid. Legally, they had nothing. But lawsuits weren't always about law. Sometimes they were about noise, pressure, reputation. That night, I got a call from a blocked number. I usually ignore those now, but something told me to pick it up. It was my father. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just spoke calm and cold. Said he hoped I was proud of what I'd done. Said he'd lost everything, his friends, his stability, his daughter. Then he said the one thing that hit me harder than all the rest. You always were a disappointment. You just waited longer to show it. And then he hung up. I sat there staring at the dark screen, phone still in my hand. Disappointment. That word had followed me my whole life. From my mother when I didn't dress right, from my father when I didn't agree with him, from Dory when I didn't do what she wanted. Every time I put myself first, I became a disappointment. It used to crush me. Now it felt like freedom. 3 weeks later, the case was dismissed. My lawyer filed a motion with enough documentation to bury them. Every asset had been accounted for. Every transfer signed. Every dollar traceable. The judge called it a gross misuse of the court's time. It was over. At least legally. But word spreads. People in our town talk. The same cousins who sent guilt messages started changing their tune. Old friends of my parents stopped inviting them to events. One aunt even messaged me quietly to say she'd always known they treated me unfairly. She just didn't know how bad it was. Peter has always stayed close. He showed up with groceries the day after the case was dismissed and didn't say a word about it. Just put the bags down, handed me a bottle of wine and said, "You kept your dignity. That's more than they'll ever have." We sat on my back porch that night and didn't talk much. We didn't need to. It was done. They lost everything. Not just money. Not just power. They lost me. and they were never getting me back.